everyone, welcome to Index.Academy, a new edition where we try to address some of the important topics for the distributed workforce, for remote workers, for people working in the tech space. And during these Index Academies, we try to address sometimes more technical questions, something that could be most useful from enlarging your skills or improving some of the languages or frameworks that you are passionate about. Today we will be discussing about 2024, which is it's a hard year, and we'll be addressing this topic together with Alan. Alan will be the guest, the speaker today. We'll have a Q&A session maybe for the first 20-25 minutes, I'll be addressing specific questions to Alan to understand better what is happening on the market and what we can do as tech candidates to have better success here. And then after that, you'll have a chance as well to address your questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A to address questions in the second part of today's webinar. Just a few words about Alan. Alan is an expert in talent acquisition. He works both for startups, for scale-ups, as Dot or Uber or Volt, but at the same time work for bigger companies like Google as well. He's now the head and the lead of talent acquisition at Deel, which is the fastest growing HR platform in the world right now. For people that are not necessarily familiar with the word talent acquisition, I think mostly the tech candidates understand recruitment. Well, let's say that recruitment is part of talent acquisition. What we usually do is we don't just make sure that the process is right, but we make sure that when you are arriving to a page that you want to submit, or when we are creating a unique offer to attract you to a specific job offer. So talent acquisition, it's much more than just the whole recruitment process. Also, Alan helped hire more than 200 people in the last few months. So he'll be able to share with us what you need to do as candidates to stand out, especially right now when you have a lot of competition, when number of offers per each position is growing day by day. But also he's passionate about tech. He is the person that thinks that technology and recruitment and talent acquisition grows together. And also he's passionate about AI and how AI will shape and change this whole industry. My name is Eugene. I'm the VP platform of Index. We are the go-to platform when you are hiring high-performing, curated, vetted engineers. So I'll be the host, the moderator today, and Alan will join us. Hi, Alan, and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll jump right through it. And if you could share a bit, how does 2024 look from your point of view? You've been in the space and in the recruitment and tech space for some time. Is this something that you are seeing or not seeing in this year, something that from your point of view makes this year a bit different than the other times?
Yeah, it's a changing landscape. You've got different ends of the spectrum. You've got firstly inconsistency in terms of funding, right? Different startups, different areas, geographically impacted, etc., or thriving. So obviously there's a high correlation with funding rounds and investments in technology, and then typically you tend to hire a lot more people when you're raising kind of quite large funding rounds. And if you're consolidating and raising some cash but not all of the cash that you want, then that impacts hiring needs. There's layoffs that are happening right across the board, and there's access to a larger pool of applicants. I think if I speak to a number of my TA counterparts in a variety of different companies, they're seeing big application rates coming in, much larger than we've seen previously. So that's a consideration. There's definitely, from what I see, like green shoots across the board, across different teams, where people are starting to unlock more headcount, but it's still a wait and see game, right? It's not everyone is kind of full on hiring. It's not everyone is full on kind of consolidating, and there's a different picture in different countries and different industries as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just a follow-up here. What I've seen with some of the candidates in the last few weeks, few months, especially the ones that were not available on the market for the last 1 or 2 years, they're kind of surprised what's happening on the market. Some of them don't really understand what is a hiring freeze period, and the reality today is very different from it was 2 years ago. And if you could share what could it mean for a candidate that, let's say today they start looking for a new project after 5-6 years, and the reality that actually they will end up seeing, which will be very different to what they've seen a few years ago.
Yeah, so there's more competition as number one. I think if we were to look back pre-pandemic, if you're in software engineering, for instance, you would typically be messaged quite significantly by agencies, by internal recruiters, etc., etc. So there was there was probably a consideration for software engineers in very high demand. So therefore you could pick and choose kind of projects, and then you would be able to develop relationships with agencies, develop relationships with internal recruiters, and you had more freedom of choice. Now it's a little bit more competitive. I'll give you a couple of data points, right? So across the board, not specific to engineering at Deel, but we get about 30,000 applications on a weekly basis, right? And yet this year we're probably going to hire around 2,000 of them. So 1.5 million applications coming in this year, and we'll hire around 2,000. So when you look at that from a percentage, you typically used to use a percentage rate of like for every 100 applications, like you'd hire one person, right? Law of average. Now it's like 0.3 or 0.2, right? So it's 5x more difficult when you're doing an application. So I think that's something to be mindful of. And even if companies aren't hiring as many, there's less jobs, then it means that there's more people active, and therefore there's increased competition. So that's something to really kind of pay attention to. And I think we, in some instances, we have experienced some of those trends for everyone on this call.
Right. And yeah, so what I also would add here is I see people being also surprised by new regions entering into the market. Like when I was recruiting in the Central and Eastern Europe in tech, maybe even 5-7 years ago, LATAM region was never considered like this place where you would find thousands of great engineers.
Yeah.
Usually people would associate only with East Asia, India, and maybe the Balkans, Romania, Ukraine, Russia, and then that's pretty much it. And right now when I'm sharing with them that LATAM is their biggest competitor because you have people with great English working in the New York hours, this is really changing the game.
Yeah. And I just share with you, we've got over 100 software engineers in Brazil at Deel. So yeah, we do see that, right? And we see previously, I mean, the trend is still continuing. Like, this is what we see with our clients. You typically previously and it still happens today in the majority of cases, but you typically tend to see that for software engineering, they're hiring in hubs. So what would happen is you would create a site in, I don't know, Romania, you would create a site in Amsterdam, you'd create a site in Sweden or wherever it is, or India, and then you would hub that location. And then recruiters would then be geofencing their search around those hubs, right? Now, there is a lot more, there's a lot more opportunity now to work remotely, and therefore there's less reliance to, because it's always very difficult for internal teams to staff against those hubs, and hire those teams. So therefore, you had a little bit more kind of maneuverability, right? As a software engineer, because of the demand constraint in that one specific hubs. So there's an interesting opportunity where companies are now coming to us, like Deel as a client, and saying, we don't want to pay a San Francisco salary, right, of a software engineer. And as a result in which we can then hire someone in Brazil, for instance, and not pay the same salary as a software engineer in Silicon Valley. And therefore CFOs are looking at that and saying, okay, well, this is a challenging time for us as a business. We're not just looking at the top line growth, we're also looking at kind of bottom line. So therefore, there is more of a shift towards remote work in order to reduce the war for talent in that hub location, to be able to increase your pool of candidates and also lower the cost base. So that is definitely something that our clients are telling us. And it's happening a lot, right? We've got hundreds of thousands of contractors, EORs on our platform, and we definitely see that trend. Yeah, we see that trend. So it's something to definitely be aware of.
Right. I'll build on something that you mentioned a bit earlier, which is software engineers used to get a lot of offers and they don't get as much today. And actually, they have to do something that was not necessarily natural to them, is to write to recruiters.
Writing a CV first, right? Because you probably rely on your LinkedIn profile previously, right? And yeah.
Yeah, and so the question would be here is what they can do in terms of building relationship with recruiters, because when you are receiving 1,000 application per role, you'll still look at people that kind of you have a relationship with. So the software engineers will have to start doing something that they hate, which is building relationships. So is there something that you suggest, maybe at least 2-3 things that they can do, something that it's maybe comes a bit unnatural, but is not as hard to do as they are not necessarily outgoing or communicating or social person that are building easily relationship, but maybe at least 2-3 things that they could do to start building relationship with recruiters if they want to stand out a bit from those thousands of applications?
Yeah, listen, I give this advice to people, not just for software engineering, but just kind of more broadly. You want to work on interest, like what are the so let's take a step back. Instead of like, is the objective to get a job? Well, no, that's probably the result, right? And then we're like, okay, well, what do we actually want to work on, right? What is your motivation? And then if you think about like a value proposition of like how you're motivated to do the best work that you want to do, then there's like 6 different components, right? So one is affiliation and reputation. Do I like the company or industry that this company is operating in? Number 2 is like the people and the culture. Do I like the ways of working? Number 3 is like the nature of work. So do I like the technical complexity? Do I like the stage in which the product roadmap is then there? Like what is like the nature of work, right? Number 4 is personal growth. Am I doing this same project that I've done 3 times over, or do I want to learn something new, right? And am I growing from a technical complexity, right? Is this pushing me for growth? And then you've got financial reward as number 5. Is really important to know what you're getting paid, right? And then the construct of that is that cash is that kind of cash plus equity, all of those things. And then number 6 is like associated benefits. Now, this isn't the benefits package that someone gets and how many days off you get and all of these things. It's like, is it remote work, for instance? And then does it allow me to spend time at home versus going into an office? Is it what are the associate is there, I don't know, is there like free food, or I don't know, like the intangible kind of benefits. So I think that for everyone to really understand, like, where is my priority? Is my priority on like personal growth? Is my priority on nature of work? Is my priority on the industry and affiliation to that? And how do my motivations align with the mission, right? And just be very clear on like how you evaluate all of those things. Is financial reward number 1, but all of those other 5 you don't care about because you just want to get the highest paid, right? Or is it that, well, I kind of want to be paid, but actually if I get 3 offers the same, then what is my comparable? Like, am I going to focus on the industry, whatever it is? So then you're like, okay, now you know what you're actually kind of looking for and prioritizing. You can quickly vet those job applications or recruiter calls that you then have to understand what they're actually offering. And then you can ask those questions very early in the process so you don't spend your time, because it takes a long time to go through an interviewing process, do these code reviews, do all of these things, interview with people, and it can suck the energy out of you, right? Going through multiple interviewing processes. So being very streamlined on that, right? And then it's like, okay, well, if, for instance, you're going to say affinity and reputation, I want to understand like the segment they're offering. Then number 2 is about personal growth or nature of work, whatever it is, right? And then if I know that it's if those things are aligned, I probably know that I'm probably going to get paid because it's a hard job and I'm going to grow. So therefore, like, financial reward is going to come. And then you can then start to say, well, these are the target companies that I kind of want to work in. If I actually want to work in SaaS HR, for instance, you can come to us, you can come to other people. If I want to work on fintech, if I want to work on retail to transform a, data warehouse or whatever it is, then these are the types of things. And then you can actually start to say, well, this is the top of the funnel, right? And kind of treat it like a sales process in a sense, right? Where whatever you put into the top of funnel, then you're going to get at the bottom of the funnel. And if you actually have a very enriched funnel, then you'll get what you want to at the end of it. If you just have conversations with a variety of different recruiters and it's inconsistent to what they're offering and how it aligns to your value proposition, right? Then it can feel frustrating because you haven't been clear on what you're looking for at the start. And then in terms of practical advice, go and speak to a software engineer to validate. There's a lot of referral programs that companies then offering. So it doesn't have to be kind of recruiters. If you think of a day in the life of a recruiter, for instance, they're speaking to normally, when I look at my recruiters, right, you get 1.5 million applications this year. How many documents do we have to review in TA to be able to filter that through? There is a lot. So we spend 30% of our time. 1.5 million applications is 1 minute per CV review, including kind of emailing candidates, all of these things. That's 26,000 hours. And then for 26,000 hours, 8 hours a day, I need about 20 plus recruiters for 8 hours a day, just looking at applications without doing anything else, right? So when you look at that, okay, well, we're going to huge amount of time on CV review. Then is the recruiter call for 30 minutes. Then it's scheduling interviews, then it's offers and all of these things. So making insights with recruiters to become top of the funnel, so you get into the top 10%, right? And then you're not just kind of bypassed and then bottom 90% is something that you need to stand out from the crowd. But number 2 is also link with engineering managers, add engineering managers on LinkedIn, And don't lead with I'm looking for a job. Lead with I love what you're doing. I love the technical complexity. I've seen some podcast or something, blah, blah, blah.
Or I've talking to some of your
Yeah,
colleagues or
and
shares.
lead with mission and lead with purpose. And because I think most people want to work in that type of environment, which is inspiring to others, working with other great engineers. And that's where I would network. Yeah.
Perfect. Really thank you for that. And I do believe that people should understand that finding a job should be a process, not just a summary of actions.
Yes.
If it's not a process, then it might be very painful. Every day will just look like it's all over again, rather than if it's a process that progresses, you might see how things
What
evolve.
what's interesting, and I said this to I can't remember who I said this to, but um people when you get a no, like we're not hiring, or no, like you've like not passed a code review, or no to an interview, or no, we're not hiring, right? It's not a no, it's a not yet. It's like at this point in time, not yet. But continue to develop those relationships, and that not yet can turn into 2 weeks later. It's yes, we've just been signed off on this project or program. And yes, we had 3 engineering roles, but now there's 10. So really just be mindful of the not yet versus a no. And then if you continue to do those good works, right, in terms of that funnel, and be very clear on what you're looking for, then you'll quickly find that, a lot of the no's turn into like not yet, turned into kind of yeses. I'll give you one example. So when I joined Deel, I reached out to our CEO, Alex, sent him a message, didn't get a reply. I reached out to our COO,
That's
said,
it. You should stop. You didn't get a reply.
yeah. And then I reached out to the COO, Dan, and said, hey, would love to join. Like, didn't get ghosted, right? So I could have been like, okay, well, I've tried, and I've applied for
I
a
sent
role.
2 emails.
And then I applied, and then not a lot of people know, but I applied for a role and I got rejected, right? Just a bulk kind of reject. And then I reached out I was like, no, I'm not having this. So I went to our CHRO, sent them a message. We worked at Uber previously. I said, hey, would love to catch up. We crossed over here. Would love to have a coffee. And it doesn't seem like you're hiring at the moment because there's no job posting that's listed, but I can see you're expanding and you're growing. And if you're ever looking for XYZ, we had a coffee. We created a job. It wasn't listed. We created a job, and therefore I was hired as global head of TA. After interviewing with Dan and Alex through the process, and went through those interviews, and they said yes.
Brilliant. And yeah, I know that it seems bleak out there, and there is not a lot of opportunities, but there are roles that appear every day. And regarding this, you've mentioned SaaS, you've mentioned fintech. I think what I've seen in the last maybe half a year or 1 year, people that are switching to remote, people that are switching for more in-office, more traditional tech companies type of approach to working remotely, let's say from Serbia for a company in US, or from Argentina for a company in New York. What I've seen, they get very surprised is that remote actually it's not that easy, and it's not 1,000 jobs everywhere.
No.
And the question here, there should be some industries, maybe from what you know, where there's still hiring, or there is more hiring, or something that they should look more into. Because of course, if they would look at an industry level is now more in stagnation, hiring freeze, layoffs. But there are elements, there are parts of the industry that are moving in somewhere that you could maybe share or direct for people that think they could get a high chance to get an opportunity?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's not just in recruiting, but you have peaks and troughs, right? And it's just a natural kind of world, like investment banking, there's peaks and troughs and all of these areas, right? So if a sector's dead, it will probably rebound, right? Crypto, for instance, was like crazy. No, it's dead. No, it's crazy. And no, it's dead. It's just like it's cyclical. So I think what we see today is again SaaS coming back again, right? Marketplaces, you know, for the last, I mean, I've spent a lot of my career in marketplaces. If you think about getting someone into the back of a taxi, getting someone getting someone some food, or getting someone on a scooter, right? That's an on-demand marketplaces, and we saw the rise in with Airbnbs and the Ubers in 2000. Well, really started to grow started in 2010-ish, but like 2012, 2013, marketplaces crazy, and then by 2017 kind of dipped a little bit, kind of rose a little bit, and it's kind of dipping, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So SaaS, for instance, is there. I think that there's some stuff in like pockets of crypto that are coming back. Fintech is big. What else? Some of the some like retail and marketplaces like are kind of okay, right? Some of the established industry that you wouldn't consider as a technology company, actually, like when you look in, you know, if you look in retail, for instance, right, they're not kind of a technology company, but actually they delayed a lot of work around data warehouses and data architectures and all of these things. So therefore, there's a lot more work around kind of solidifying their kind of their architecture, right? And to deprecate some legacy systems and all of these things. So there's definitely a lot of pockets that that are coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe also to add here, I think it's okay to keep building the relationship and the network that you mentioned with companies or with the industries that you are passionate about, but at the same time to do work in industries that are having a momentum right now until the industry that you are passionate about is coming back.
Yeah.
And
I would also look at I'd look at money movements as well, right? Because if you like, if a company is raising funding, that's a clear signal that the water rises all boats, right? So if a sector is good, chances are you'll see a green shoot in terms of a funding event happening. So pay attention to TechCrunch, right? Pay attention to Crunchbase and all of these areas. And once you see, okay, well, HR tech, right? There's a couple of companies that are doing acquisitions, a couple of companies that are doing like investment rounds. There's one announced yesterday, right? So I'm not going to name who. But it shows that that industry is quite good, right? And then you can look at, okay, well, who are the players in that industry? You can go onto G2 and look at, you know, who is popular on G2, right? For clients, etc. And then if you look up and to the right, there's your target base, right? And even if some of the companies that aren't doing as well, maybe it's because of their tech stack. Maybe they need to kind of invest there as well. So there's definite opportunities.
Yeah, maybe the period of social networks is slowly declining, and the question is, what was the next big thing that I could get into?
But it's one other point as well. So, for instance, like with the emergence of remote work, LinkedIn isn't built in terms of a job search to facilitate. Well, you have to type in the title and you have to type in the location. Well, if you're in Amsterdam, for instance, and I'm searching for roles in Amsterdam, then my pool is going to be severely limited. So LinkedIn is not going to serve me in terms of my job application for a global role or those insights or that remote work, a remote software engineer, and I put Amsterdam as an area as someone who advertises, a lot of jobs. That you won't find those opportunities through those existing platforms. So you do have to look outside of LinkedIn, right?
Or you can use LinkedIn for building relationship, but not just expect that one platform will solve the problem. And speaking regarding LinkedIn, I'm just curious, your let's say vision or the way you see things here. There is a big debate if candidates should use green banners that are showing they're open for work, they are unemployed, they don't have a project that is paying them. There is a lot of description. There is a big Reddit and subreddit regarding the green banner to use it or not. What would you recommend? Would you hire software engineers that are having green banner on their LinkedIn profiles?
If I don't care, if I'm honest, I don't care if there's a
Right.
red banner, green banner, pink, purple, blue. I really don't care. Now, I think the question stems from, like, ultimately that's a tool for recruiters, right? And you'll just be able to go and do a LinkedIn search, and then there's a button that says open to work, and then you can just look at all of the open to works, etc., etc. That's one tool that kind of we look at, right? So you can come to the top of the pile for open to work. What I think a lot more of my recruiters are doing is who's following my company, because it doesn't matter if you're available or not available to work. But if you're actually previously kind of following my company, we use that as a search string to be able to say, if you are and it's all about efficiency. So if you are a follower of my company, you're more likely to respond back positively to a message to then say that, yes, let's have a conversation, right? But you're relying on somebody else. You're relying on somebody else. So that could be a channel that you do. I think there's also some, just quite frankly, some negative to it as well. I haven't followed the Reddit thread, if I'm being honest, but it probably impacts your leverage, right? If I'm available to work, then what's my leverage, right? You could put in your leverage, I'm speaking to 4 or 5 other companies, you need to move fast because I've got all of these things, right? But that's impact leverage. So I don't have an answer, but if you've got a pink, green, red, blue banner, I don't care.
Brilliant. And I encourage people to start addressing questions in the Q&A. We'll get to that in a moment. Just maybe final 1 or 2 questions from my side. So I think one question would be regarding the templates that candidates are using to apply to 100 jobs without customizing either the message or the name of the message, or I saw your seasoned recruiter, I'm looking for work, help me find. So I know that for many years candidates were complaining that recruiters are using this unhumane templates and messages. But now I've seen a lot of that happening from candidate side. What would you suggest here? Is Gen AI useful? Is using ChatGPT to create templates and then just blast them to hundreds of job posts? Is that bringing any success?
No. So easy to see what's a Gen AI message. Just be sincere to yourself, cut to the point. If you take it back to, if we can all agree that there's more competition for the market, you have to stand out, right? You have of that, I mean, I'm like 1 minute of CV review. It's probably not 1 minute, right? It's probably you have to capture the person's attention within the first 20 to 25 seconds, right? In order for them to read on and invest that full minute, right? That's the time that you have. The CV or application or intro is a marketing document. That is all that it is. It has no context to skills or anything else. It's just read more, right? And if you really want to, email me and let's have a first conversation. So if it feels cookie cutter, it probably is. So cut straight to the point and hit her early, hard your value proposition, right? And don't ask for help and say, can you help me to find it? I get a ton of applications, I get a ton of messages on LinkedIn to say, hey, would love to understand a little bit about, how you're hiring. I'm thinking of applying. I'm like, I can't spend time with you. I'm sorry, I have no time to do. And it's like, hey, could you intro me to the hiring manager or something? I have no capacity to do that. So what I think is more beneficial is to lead with purpose and lead with a why of, I love your organization. I saw how XYZ person communicated on this podcast, or I saw a CTO note, or I saw something that is relatable that got me inspired, and I would love to entertain the option of joining your organization, right? And then it's more relatable, because otherwise, if you think about it, coming back to the funnel, use ChatGPT, fire off a ton of things and email 30, 40 different companies. The downstream impact is you're going to have to speak to those companies if they say yes. So why not? And then if you have a 30-minute call with something that doesn't quite work, it makes more sense to me that you take less time in your funnel, right? And then you fill it with quality and therefore research a little bit more, right? Look at Stack Overflow, look at GitHub, look at all of those areas. There's some insights that you can draw into. These are some exciting projects that I want to actually kind of work on, and lead with your value proposition of, again, just to repeat, affiliation and reputation. Number 2 is people and culture, right? Number 3 is nature of work. Number 4 is personal growth. Number 5 is financial reward. And number 6 is intangible benefits. So lead with your why and lead with the value proposition and why you're motivated. I think that's probably the more interesting thing. I'll give you one example. So this was a lot earlier. There was a guy who I was hiring at Uber, and he sent me his CV and his cover letter. And instead of having a CV that was years of experience, kind of a cookie cutter kind of CV, he then did it he UX'd it in a description of like my journey so far. And it was start trip, went to university, drop off number
Like
1.
a career roadmap.
Yeah, career roadmap, drop off number 2. And he did it in Uber branding. So as a recruiter, I'm like, that really stood out. And of course, I'm going to have a conversation with this person. And he got hired. And we had hundreds of applications for that for that role. So it's actually pay attention to the smaller things and do more with less.
Super. We started receiving questions, so let's address for the next 20 minutes the questions from the audience. First, we'll start with the question from Andy. So who is favoring more the remote work for tech talents? Is it the CTOs or the CFOs? Who from what you've heard with Deel or a Deel, who are the people that are driving, yes, we should be more open to remote talent, to global talent? from the C
It
level?
depends on the culture of the organization. It depends on the industry of the organization and the history of the organization. I was speaking to a startup CEO this morning, and he was like, I want to have the shoulder to shoulder collaboration with our engineering, right? We're an early stage startup. I feel that's really important. And we're in an early stage, and if we make a mishire or they're not as aligned to the rest of the engineering team, it's going to be difficult for us. And by default, they're in a space which facilitates remote work. So, you would have thought they'd have lent towards more of but it's the stage that they're at. Like right now, the stage is here. However, once we raise our Series A, well, they've just raised their Series A. Once they kind of spent their Series A money and like develop the products a little bit more, and then they've got more differentiation in terms of kind of more engineering, more product, more data, etc., then they'll probably be able to release that and actually kind of hire remotely, because that's just the stage that they're in, right? Another organization probably would then look at and say, no, we're remote first, right from the start. And they've seen it work and it's just been their culture. So it really depends. Now, if you look at the mandate, right, the CFO typically is the one signing off the budget, right? Then the CTO is, well, I've got to make this budget work, and I've got to hire the right people. I've got to align them to the right principles. I've got to align them to the right mission. We've got to build the right product. We've got to deal with collaboration, etc. The unintended consequence of working in a remote world is that Slack or whatever platform, I'm not promoting Slack, but Slack is your office. So I don't know if well, I'm sure you all worked remotely, right? Or you definitely use Slack, but Slack intent versus kind of the meaning behind it can be misinterpreted. You miss those water cooler moments. So it's a lot easier to work in silos in a remote environment, as opposed to having that water cooler moment or that Friday evening drinks where you're working with a salesperson. You're like, oh, that's a really interesting thing. Some companies have used donuts and some, etc., to like meet random people. And after the first couple, you think that's really great. And after a few more, you're like, I'm going to pause. Right. And because you have the same conversation over and over again. This is what I'm working on. What are you working on? And it's great in terms of alignment and things, but so it really depends on the organization. You can't characterize and say one person's looking at this and this is the agenda. It really depends on the stage of development of that organization.
Right. Thank you for that. We have one more question from Andre, something that I've seen also coming from multiple candidates that come to Index as well. So the question is, they are looking for remote roles, and then when they are applying to those roles, they have a specific location. In this case, and they're saying that my location is Albania, and nobody's replying to my applications. If I change my location to Western Europe or to US, even though the role is positioned as a global role, people started replying or people starting outreaching. So the question is, why recruiter discriminate on location if the role is global remote?
It depends. Yeah. So global remote, yes. Okay, we can hire anyone. However, when you think about hiring laws, compliance, all of these things, it may very well be that that organization doesn't have an entity in Albania, right? For instance. So therefore, it might mean that they're not discriminating because of Albania. It might mean that actually it's maybe quite challenging for me to actually compliantly hire you, right? And depending on where that organization's headquartered, there's different labor laws that may be a factor. So yes, you might see some correlation of, if I change my location from Albania to, I don't know, France, for instance, it may very well be that they have an entity in France and they can invoice you based on that contractor agreement. That's why we see a lot of clients coming to us as a contractor or as an EOR in order to hire. So sometimes it's not just based on, okay, the CV, there's also other factors and other components that go into it. So we're trying to do our best at Deel in order to educate the market where you don't need to have an entity in order to hire someone. And then for contractor agreements, for instance, there's a compliant way to be able to hire people and do that. So yes, you can hire anyone anywhere in the world, but you need to have the regulatory setup in order to compliantly hire. So that I'm not suggesting that that's the reason for being ghosted, but there's other factors that go into it. So it's not just 1 + 1 = 2.
Right. We have another question regarding the contracts, and maybe what are some of the things that people find difficult when they are stepping in this global distributed workforce? They used to be employed locally, now they want to be employed globally. And I think one more element here, what I would add is, do everyone need to create a B2B company in order to have more offers as global freelancers? Or
Yeah,
actually
so
now with Deel, a lot of these issues could be resolved.
yes, quite frankly, yes. So firstly, if you're going into contracting, there needs to be like, so I want to be a contractor, right? Or a flexible resource, whatever it is, right?
Fractional worker.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, exactly. So firstly, they need to be able to pay you and pay you compliantly, right? And they need to make sure that the obligation of the employer is to make sure that there's the appropriate tax withholdings. And then there needs to be the flow of information and reporting, because it's the obligation of the employer in order to report from a taxation perspective, all of these things. Now, if you then are saying, well, I'm going to create a company, I'm then going to be an employee or director or whatever that relationship is that you put in place with your company, that's a B2B agreement. And then you can have different kind of agreements with the entity and then with yourself, right? That's why a lot of people create their own companies, right, when going into contracting. For the first time going into that, has a lot of in the UK, it's quite easy to create a limited company and all of these things. In different markets, it's more complicated. So it really depends where you are. There's also some, you can list yourself with the local tax office to then say I'm self-employed, all of these things. There's different kind of connotations to different areas, right? And then there's also some connotations between parity, right? I've got these people over here that are employees, this person wants to be a contractor, all of these things. There's a kind of a legal complication or consideration there. So I would say to start, do it in a way that is, you can dip your toe into the sea and see if it's hot or cold before you dive in. And there's sharks and alligators, and you're like, oh, I don't really want to do this. I want to go back to doing X, Y, and Z. So then save yourself the time, just dip your toe in the water, understand if this is really for you. You also need to consider, like, if you've never done remote work before, maybe it's not for you. Maybe you actually like to be in an office and you like to have that environment where
Which is fine, by the way. I saw people now, they feel somehow ashamed to say that they don't like remote work because they feel stigmatized.
No, it's like I have a team, right? My team's about 60 people globally. If I could have everyone in the office, I would, right? Because it helps with me understanding different people, it's very challenging for me if I've got, employees in LATAM or in the US or in India or in, Philippines. How do I create a personal connection with all of my team? Right. So there's pros and cons. It's like the peaks and troughs, right? If I do too much remote work, I kind of want to go into the office and go into the WeWork and be like, no, I want to have friends, right? And then if I go into the office too many times, the commute to the office is really painful. You know, I want to be able to go on holiday and have a bit of flexibility and freedom to say, well, I'm going to work 2 days a week and I'm going to take 2 days off because, you know, it's nearing the weekend or whatever it is. So it's that. So yeah, it's not. So just suck it and see.
Yeah, I like this, especially for people that are just entering in the space. You don't necessarily need to
Just
create
make
a
people
company
aware.
from
I
the
mean, this
start.
isn't a plug.
Yeah.
This isn't a plug for Deel, right? But if you can, if you also then kind of educate, kind of, you know, yes, we think, you know, we are one of the fastest growing companies, but we're not mainstream yet, right? So recruiters might just think, oh, well, we're not able to hire in Albania, for instance, and therefore we're just going to ignore your CV. And actually, if you're saying there's plenty of different, you know, ways in which to employ via EOR or via contractor or X, it's actually a lot easier to be able to do these things. And therefore it might reduce one of the hurdles that, you know, you would have to jump over and kind of make it a speed bump as opposed to a hurdle.
Thank you for that. We'll take the next question from Valentin. I'll just rephrase it a bit and add one more element. Regarding the making the cake and eating it, there are a lot of candidates that they want the benefits of distributed work, but they want also all the empowerment of the local laws. And what's what's the trade-off? What's the understanding that I think people should have here when they're applying to a role and they say, I want to take local holidays, paid leave, but at the same time, it's okay if I never have to commute to your office. So there's sometimes here conflicting, I think, understandings, and maybe there's just a few things that people should understand um, compared to what they used to be employed in a local law.
I mean, it's a difficult one, because it's easy. I'll give it like in Europe, we have a lot higher holidays, right? And then if you say, oh, well, you know, the statutory norm is 20 days in the Netherlands plus, you know, bank holidays, right? Oh, that's really egregious, right? This other company is offering 32 days plus holidays. That's really egregious. Like, and then you can say, well, why aren't I having that, right? And then you look at the US counterparts who have 2 weeks off, right? 14 days. And you're like, okay, well, that's, you know, that's actually all right. It's not too bad in consideration. I mean, I had people at a former company, right, who were based in the Netherlands, and we used to pay commute to work allowance. And then when we said, well, you know, if you would like to work from home, like no problem, but then it's a legal requirement of ours not to pay commute to work. If you're not commuting to work, we can't give you that benefit. And then there was uproar of, well, why am I not getting the commute to work? I was like, because you walk from your kitchen to your office. There's no commute to work. Like there's just,
Well, there's 9 steps, but yeah,
yeah,
maybe they don't need to
but we
be
can't pay you
compensated.
per mile, right? That's ultimately what the legislation is. So I think it's just taking things with context and understand the kind of the purpose behind it. And I wouldn't get too frustrated or too nitpicky on the minor tactical details. Focus on the bigger picture. Again, is it really, do you want to hold on to something like that? Or, you know, are you more motivated by the affiliation, reputation, nature of work, all of these things? And are you driving kind of value to the business and all of these things? And if you are, and if it's kind of actually, you know, part of the value proposition that the organization prides itself on, then naturally that should be distributed. So you should be taken advantage of, right? But just kind of, you know, there's a book, Measure What Matters, right? And I'm just correlating it back to, you know, not measure what matters, but yeah, pick your battles, right? Ultimately.
Yeah. There's one more question from Michelle regarding an example that you you gave earlier with the customized CV. The problem in there are two problems that somehow, if we unite them, first is in tech, there's a bit of hard to be very creative because you have to mention that you have 10 years in Python, 7 years in Django framework. This is the languages that I used. And if the candidates have similar skill, it's very hard to make them stand out. And I think the other problem is that a lot of ATSs are having very rigid application form, and you cannot be created in a form or a way of approach which is very strict and guided. So what could be some of the ways that people could make sure that their resume or maybe the message or something at least stands out from the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, listen, just to cut back, it's probably an interesting thing to share with everyone. Like, one of the interesting trends that is happening right now is AI and CV review, right? And it's not based on Boolean logic of like keyword searches. So normally you'd put at the bottom of your CV or like hide it all in white so it doesn't show, but then you have all of the keywords and associated kind of keywords, right, built into your CV. So when you do a Boolean logic search, you kind of show up. Right now, there's a lot more kind of AI to be like, okay, well, if you've worked with this particular language, it's actually closely correlated to this language. So whilst you may not have coded in this specific part of the language, actually, it's not too much of a ramp up to kind of learn a new language, and it only takes like 1 or 2 months, right? For instance. And then a lot of other organizations, we see it with like AI, for instance, at the CV review, which is if you've worked at this company, then you're in the payroll sector, right? So if you would ask me a question, if one of my recruiters is reviewing CVs in, I don't know, they're based in Europe, and let's say that we're reviewing CVs in China, South Korea, Japan, all of these places, I don't know the payroll companies in that region, right? So I don't know if like you list payroll, it could be a 10-person payroll organization, it could be a 5,000-person payroll organization. I have no clue. So then what a lot of AI is doing is saying, okay, well, this company, it's known on different repositories that they're using this language and this language. This is the sector that they're in. And actually, we see high correlation between, a mid-market or enterprise company in terms of number of employees, etc. Has a close correlation with hiring efforts here, and here. So actually, AI is playing more of a role in stack ranking applications, right? So that's something to note, where it's not based on Boolean logic. So that's one thing to note. It's a newer trend that is coming up. It's not established. A lot of organizations are still dealing with a human ultimately looking at CV reviews and going and sifting through a lot of that. So it's something to consider. I think, the cover letter for me has long been dead.
Right.
And it will continue to be dead. I don't think there's an emergence of the cover letter.
Yeah,
However,
we're not going back to facts and cover letters.
no, we're not going back, right? Because then my 1.5 million documents turns into 3 million documents. Absolutely not. We're not going back there. But what I will say is capture the attention. Think about if you've got 30 seconds, I encourage everyone in this call, look at your CV, right? What is the most relevant thing, top line, that you want someone to read? And then if you look at, like, if the most interesting part of your CV is 4 years ago, I worked at this company and this is the most proud achievement, put achievements at the top and say, company X, this was my achievement, this X, right? And then you can link it, and then you can read more. So what is if you think about like boxing, where are your power punches? And put your power punches at the top, and then it will show more of the thing. Don't just list it in terms of here's my address, right? don't put your address and your contact details at the top. If they want to contact you, they'll find it, right? Put it at the bottom as the footer, right? Don't waste time on headers and footers, and then you have all your contact information on every single page. You're losing space for some of your the power punches. So put your power punches at the top, like name, no contact details. You know, if your opening statement is I am, you know,
Searching for the next project.
This is my personal statement, unless it's like super interesting and relates to affiliation, reputation, nature of work, all of those components that I mentioned earlier. Don't bother, right? Put it as personal information at the bottom, right? If that's not your power punch. If it is, and you're trying to then show affiliation and reputation, like I really love this company, I really want to do X, Y, and Z, and it's personalized, don't bother. And just make sure you've got your power punches at the top.
Perfect. Right. Thank you so much, Alan. Was a pleasure. We're 1 minute over. Thank you everyone for attending today. I hope you got at least a few ideas that will help you in the next weeks, months. The market probably will still have some hiccups, but as we said, it's cyclical, and we really believe tech work will be back very soon, at least some of the industries. Which is such a pleasure. Please follow Alan and Deel and Index and myself on LinkedIn. And thank you so much for attending Index Academy. See you at the next edition.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.